Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Larry Metz, Florida House of Representatives. I wanted to mention a couple of things. First of all, this has been a great couple of days here. I really appreciate the hard work of the Executive Committee and all the work that was done by everyone here. I think the name Assembly of State Legislatures is very appropriate for us, and I was thinking as I was listening to some of the comments earlier that one of the things we might want to consider doing fairly soon, since I believe this Assembly of State Legislatures is going to be, I believe, a long-term project, and it's going to survive a lot of us, hopefully, when we term out in Florida, for example, that others will follow in our stead and be working in the same effort. I think that the Assembly of State Legislatures should adopt its own rules, an actual set of rules that would govern this so we can hand this down from one set of leaders to the next if we're going to be sustaining this over a period of years. And some of the things we're talking about now, such as how representation at the Assembly of State Legislatures is determined by the states and how the invitations are sent and how they're responded to, could be a subject of that. I believe that what the gentleman from New Hampshire said is exactly right, that the more we have coming here from the states, the better. We're going to follow the principle, hopefully, here in the Assembly of State Legislatures of one state, one vote. We from Florida came up, we have a dozen of us here from both chambers. Our plan as in our Article 5 working group was that anytime we were on a roll call vote here, which we presume would be on a state-by-state basis, we were going to huddle and internally decide how Florida would vote. So 12 of us were going to get together, even though only 3 of us were appointed by the legislative leaders to actually cast votes. Our decision before we ever got here was that we're taking the poll of our Florida group, and we would vote the will of that group as a state. So the number coming from the states to this Assembly of State Legislatures is not as important as just having representation from every state. So I would also suggest if we do adopt rules for the Assembly of State Legislatures, that those rules have some alternatives in it for the notification to the states of a meeting of the Assembly. I think you start with the legislative leaders, the Speaker and the President, in the case of a state like Florida. And if they fail to respond within a certain time before that meeting is being planned, and so you have no response, say, after 60 days goes out, then you would go to the caucus leaders in those chambers and say, we've asked your legislative leaders to appoint, we haven't heard anything, but we want you to know there's a meeting in December and we want your state represented. So if your legislative leaders don't feel it's important enough to do that, we invite you to let your individual caucus members know so that they can attend, and we would get representation here one way or the other. The most important thing going forward for this to be successful is the involvement of all 50 states, and there has to be legislators of like mind in every one of the states, and yet we only have, well, I say we have 30 or so, 33 maybe, but we should be shooting for 50, so alternative ways of getting people here. The number is not as important as having someone here from each state, and let the states vote state by state as they go forward, and never to be anything other than one state, one vote. And finally, I just want to mention on the Article 5 Convention of the States, which of course we're not talking about right now, but I don't think we should ever take the position that we can create a rule that says one state, one vote at an Article 5 Convention of the States. I believe if anything is clear from Article 5, it is that it is a convention of the states. Everything that is in Article 5 now, which isn't a whole lot, is based on states. The number of states required to apply before Congress issues the call, the number of states required for ratification. It is a convention of the states. It should always be one state, one vote, not because we decide that and propose it and the states agree, but because Article 5 requires it. So I think we should be very careful in our language that we're not saying as a body that we're going to create a rule that says one state, one vote at the Article 5 convention, which would adopt that rule. I think Article 5 requires that at any Article 5 convention of states, it be one state, one vote. So we should always get used to thinking that way. And then as we organize ourselves as the Assembly, where we do create our own rules for how the Assembly operates, we follow that same practice. We get used to doing that with roll call votes here. So thank you for your indulgence. Appreciate the opportunity to comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And excellent comments. And frankly, I'm a little embarrassed because I hadn't thought we should have rules for the Assembly of State Legislatures for our newly created, including not only the delegation, but the committees and how the committees will operate, votes, all of those things that should go in rules. So that's just one more thing for you to do, Senator Holzman. And you know, not to be, I mean, frankly, we probably need to create some subcommittee on rules for adoption of for this assembly. And that's something that the executive committee will take up and try to get some folks to bring those forward at some time in the future. So
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Paul Workman from the Texas House. I'm looking at Section 4, and this is clearly about sending an invitation by substituting the word appointed for present. It appears as if we're setting policy, because if one state appoints 6 and they come, they're all going to expect to vote. That may or may not be the rules that we adopt for this body. So I would argue against changing the word present. Perhaps something within the invitation could talk about how people would be appointed, but we don't necessarily want to set policy through a reference to just an invitation. Thank you.
thank you very much. Further comments or discussion on the motion or on the resolution in total? Representative from Florida and then a representative from New Mexico.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one comment. Yesterday in our Rules and Procedures Committee, we did, in fact, vote to divide into 2 subcommittees, one for rules and one for procedures. But I just wanted to reiterate and reinforce Representative Larry Metz's comments. I'm Charles Van Zant, Florida House. Forgot to say that, but nevertheless, there is a group dynamic here that will occur in every state legislature once this invitation is issued, such that if leadership in either chamber refuses to participate, once leadership in the other chamber actually does participate, then that's going to start raising the bar for the leadership of the other chamber. And if leadership in neither chamber elects to participate, then if the caucus leaders are then contacted so that you start moving down line, you're going to create that aura of, hey, this is going to happen. We really ought to have a seat at the table. And so the more people we have in this process, the better founded and the more support this process will have among the people. And that's where we need to have that sustaining reinforcement. We all know there's a lot of people out there that are opposed to this because of one reason or another. They're afraid of a runaway convention or something. But those of us who are here understand and believe that we're going to put into place those constraints that will prevent a runaway convention and allow the people to have a voice. And in addition to that, all of us here believe, I think, that when you take government and put into the hands of fewer and fewer people, you're going in the wrong direction. So we need more participation. So I would encourage the executive committee, when you give your invitation to the states, to say openly in your letter of invitation to the leadership that if they do not send someone, that you're going to go down line from that until we do get some participation. And I think that there would be enough people that would come forward to present themselves, to be able to come and to represent the people in their state government because they have been elected by those people, that would help enhance this whole process and move us quicker toward our goal. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Dean from Minnesota.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and members here today. I think we're getting a little bit afield on what the resolution is, but since other people got a far field, I'm going to take a little bit of liberty here. I'm probably the most left person in this room. I can't speak for that. There may be other individuals up in the balconies. And I think we need to be a little bit cautious about just having everything go the way states or folks want it to go. And the reason that I say that is people are watching us. And this is something that is not going to happen from everybody on the right side or everybody on the left side. This has to be something that has to be joint, that we're all working together. So if we have a situation where we have many states that are Republican-led sending 10 and 20 people, and just like this time, we are only able to get 6 Democrats here, the legitimacy of this is going to break down. So I think it's imperative that the executive committee on the call and that you all support that, is that this is something we need to try to get to be more balanced. Because remember, we're not talking about the issues that we want brought up in the event that a convention is called. We're talking about what that would look like. And it's real easy to focus on what our issues are and not what we believe is our role as state legislators in this process. So I just want to caution us when we think about that we need to be purposeful in what this body ends up being, this body, us coming together, and to echo what Senator Holtzman said from Missouri. I mean, we need to change the way this looks. Because I'll tell you, right now, we look a whole lot more like 1787 than we do like 1987. And if that's the case, I can almost guarantee that what we're attempting to do here right now is going to be failed, and it will have lots and lots and lots of resistance. So that's just some comments. There's some other things that I think I'd like to propose today, but it may be more appropriate to actually bring it to the subcommittees. So, folks, we've done a lot of work in the past day and a quarter, if I could say that. But there's still a lot of work to do, and as Senator Holtzman said, this is a first step in a long journey. So I just want us to all be considerate of that. And I also want to say I'm sorry I haven't met everybody in this room, but hopefully at some point I'll have a chance to chat with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Harrell from New Mexico.
Thank you. I just had a couple of thoughts and questions. Am I wrong in thinking that when we reconvene in December that the committees will also be reconvening? So my question is, I'm not sure, and I don't have the answer. I'm asking, how do we ensure that the folks that are here participating and spending the next 3 or 4 months doing the work of the committee and then possibly not even attending the next meeting? So I'm feeling that, yes, we do have to get more participation. In New Mexico, had Paul Bandy and I, who attended the first Mount Assembly, not pushed on our leadership, we would not have ever gotten anybody. In fact, we almost essentially had to write the letter and go and beg and push because our leadership did not quite take it seriously. And of the 5 of us that were actually appointed, only 3 of us made it. So where I do agree that we need to get bipartisan participation, I think there needs to be a different, maybe not so much limitation on how we get here. The important thing is that we get here. How we get here, I don't think should be as important, but I fear that some of us that have been participating for the last 2 meetings will not be invited or appointed, per se, to come back. So I think those are things we need to consider as we move in that direction. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative.